For thousands of years, you humans have tried to figure me out. You call me mathematics. I'm the language the universe is written in. But I don't give up my secrets easily. No, they have to be won through struggle and brilliance, and sometimes even betrayal. Today, I'm going to tell you a story from a time when one of my secrets was so valuable, men would fight a duel over it.
So, picture this. We're in a church in Milan. The year is 1535. There are two men facing off, but not with swords or pistols. They're using a different kind of weapon entirely. The prize? 30 lavish banquets for the winner, and a reputation that could make or break your entire career.
That's right, their weapons were equations, specifically problems involving what you call x to the third power, or x cubed. For literally thousands of years, this was a great wall you humans just couldn't climb. The best minds in Babylon, in Greece, during the Islamic Golden Age, they all tried and they all failed to find a general solution. For all intents and purposes, these problems were impossible to solve.
So let me introduce you to our fighters. In one corner, you have Niccolo Fontana. He was cruelly nicknamed Tartaglia, which means the stammerer, because of an injury he suffered as a child. He was brilliant, totally self-taught, a real survivor. And in the other corner, Antonio Fior. Now, Fior wasn't some great genius, but he had an ace up his sleeve. A secret formula for solving these very equations, passed down from his teacher. He was absolutely sure he was going to win.
And this, right here, gets to the heart of the matter. We're talking about a jealously guarded secret. You're probably wondering, why all the drama? Why was one formula so precious? Well, to get that, you've got to understand the world these guys were living in.
See, in this era, my truths weren't just published in a journal for the good of all humankind. Oh no, they were professional assets. They were hoarded like treasure. A mathematician's income, their entire livelihood really, depended on being able to solve problems that nobody else could. Giving away your method, that was basically professional suicide. And the cubic equation was the highest wall there was. It wasn't just some abstract puzzle. It represented the absolute frontier of human knowledge. The person who could crack it, who could solve it every single time, would be seen as a true master, someone who could unlock my deepest secrets.
So, the duel began. 30 problems from each man to the other. And the result? Well, Tartaglia, in this incredible, feverish burst of creativity right before the contest, hadn't just rediscovered Fior's little secret, he'd gone way beyond it. In less than 2 hours, he solved all 30 of Fior's problems. And Fior? He solved 0. Not a single one.
That victory made Tartaglia a superstar, but it also put a target on his back. This sets the stage for what we'll call the scholar's betrayal. He now held the most wanted secret in all of Europe, and that kind of fame? Well, it attracts attention, and in this case, it attracted a man who would change my story forever. Enter Girolamo Cardano. Now this guy, he was one of the most brilliant and complicated and ambitious people I've ever come across. He was a doctor, an astrologer, a pioneer in probability theory, and he was writing this massive book on algebra, the Ars Magna, or the Great Art. But it had a huge hole in it. He needed Tartaglia's secret.
Cardano went after Tartaglia relentlessly. He invited him to Milan, he flattered him, he promised him the world. And finally, in 1539, he swore a sacred, solemn oath to never, ever publish the formula. A very reluctant Tartaglia finally cracked, revealing his method as a cryptic poem. But Cardano just couldn't help himself. He and his students started solving even harder problems. And then, when he found out the secret had originally been discovered by another man, Del Ferro, he decided, hey, that means my oath to Tartaglia doesn't count. So in 1545, he published everything.
So the secret was out. Humanity had a new power. But in giving you this gift, Cardano had accidentally unleashed a ghost from deep inside my own rules, something that wasn't supposed to exist, something that led to an impossible solution.
The formula was flawless. It always gave the right answers. Except, for some equations, even ones that had simple, normal answers, the steps to get there, they forced you to do something that everyone, and I mean everyone, believed was completely impossible.
This was the ghost. The formula would spit out steps that required you to find the square root of, say, -121. Now just think about that for a second. What number, when you multiply it by itself, gives you a negative number? It can't be a positive number, right? Positive times a positive is positive. And it can't be a negative number because a negative times a negative is also positive. It was a complete paradox. But they didn't have a choice. It was the strangest thing. If they just held their nose and pretended these numbers were real, if they just followed the rules as if it all made sense, then poof, at the end of the calculation, all the weirdness would cancel out and the right, real-world answer would pop out. So they had to invent a new number, I, the square root of -1, a number they reluctantly called imaginary.
To them, these numbers were just a clever trick, a bit of mathematical fiction you used to get the job done. But this is the final chapter of our story, accepting the impossible. It would take centuries before you humans finally accepted that this impossible idea was just another one of my hidden truths. I mean, just listen to Cardano himself, the man who dragged these numbers into the light. He called them sophistic and said they were as subtle as they are useless. He saw them as just a weird temporary step on the way to a real answer, nothing more.
You know, even the name they finally settled on was basically a jab. The famous philosopher and mathematician René Descartes, he's the one who coined the term imaginary, and he did it to make fun of them, to say these things weren't part of my reality, they were just figments of your imagination.
And here's the ultimate irony. These fictional, useless, imaginary numbers, they turned out to be one of the most practical and essential tools in my entire history. Without them, there's no electrical engineering as you know it, no quantum mechanics. The entire digital world you live in is built on these imaginary foundations.
And so, a story that started over a duel for 30 dinners ended in a complete revolution. Cardano's betrayal was a bitter pill for Tartaglia, for sure. But it shattered that old culture of secrecy. It spread knowledge to the world, and it forced you to confront the impossible. And in doing so, you made your understanding of my numbers finally complete.
But that's how my story always goes, isn't it? Every answer just opens the door to a deeper question. Around the same time all this was happening, a French lawyer, a guy named Pierre de Fermat, was about to scribble a little note in the margin of a book. Just a tiny note, a note that would create a riddle so difficult, so profound, it would haunt our greatest minds for more than 3.5 centuries. But that's a story for another time.